Hi, this is Stephen, and this is Astro Indicator Update, Excursions into Practical Astrology, and this is episode 25. Let's see what we're going to do today. We're going to look at some price charts, kind of do an update for the New York Stock Exchange, gold, silver, Bitcoin, the US dollar, and and be specific on certain dates that are coming up. And then we'll look at Nancy Pelosi's astrology because it's interesting and it's related to what's going on politically right now. And then there are two articles I have to recommend. One is about George Soros, and another one is about the Federal Reserve and some speculation concerning the recent repo problems that we've had. So, okay, this is Dow Jones Industrials. Today's date is December 28th. It's Saturday, so this is current through yesterday. We have standard technical analysis indicators here, RSI, MACD down below. I have channels drawn in, usually more trend lines than I have drawn in, but all the vertical lines here are related to the astrology of the New York Stock Exchange. Now, as I've said often over the last few months, is that the Dow Jones is probably the most manipulated market that we have out there. But I still track the astrology, and I like to see how things match up. And so let me look at my notes here. We are getting very elevated, a little overbought. And however, the astrology coming up remains pretty strong. So, we'll just have to see how this goes. But particularly when you get out here and we're looking at like Monday, December 30th, which is 2 days from now, which is this line right there, that line right there, and then further out, January 8th. Okay, let me see if I can mark this up for you just a little bit. So that line right there, okay, and January 8th, which I think is here, okay. Historically, those are bullish astrology dates. So we'll have to see. One's coming up immediately, and then one's in a week or so on the 8th. 10 days or so. But sometimes, even though if this astrology is traditionally, from my research, bullish, if a market is very overextended, sometimes those astrology dates can just mean significant market movement. And in a rare occasion, it can mean a turning point. I think we're still pumping enough money into the system that it could go higher. At least we could go up to this green channel line that I've drawn in and bump up against that a little bit. So anyway, you can mark those on your calendar. So here we have gold. We've had a nice pop in gold. And the astrology from a couple weeks ago was a little bit questionable because it happened on a very strong date, happened on a Sunday, okay? And every now and then when you get one of those, it was this one right there, okay? When you get one of those, I'm not 100% certain whether it's going to spill over into the next day, and it had sort of a delayed reaction, and then it popped. But this is historically a very bullish astrology date. So what do we have coming up? Let me take a look here. Okay, we have on the 2nd, which is this date. I'll use my new indicator right here. This too is usually a strong bullish indicator, and we have more coming up. As I described a week ago, we just have a batch of things starting January 8th in through, for about a week. I've drawn 3 in there, but I could probably draw more. And so we'll see. Now, again, if you've been following this channel and listening to me, I combine the astrology with the technicals. I like to see the astrology confirmed by the technicals. And right now we have, a resistance line right there. So if we get over that line, all the astrology is supporting that move. Okay, and that's the main point. In addition, we have other indicators coming up that would lead me to think that we're going higher. Okay, so let's just see how it goes. We have something coming up on the 2nd. We are bumping up against some resistance, so it wouldn't surprise me for a couple days that we just kind of, bump up against that area, that 15, basically 15.15. Okay, now silver is a little bit different because in silver we had sort of a key date happen on Friday, and it happened kind of Thursday and Friday. Now this is again one of those that usually is a continuation of this bullish move, but we've traveled a long ways here, going all the way back to the 17th of December, which was a classic. That this line right here, damn, let's see what happened here. Excuse my language. This line right there was a reversal in trend. It was very classic in the astrology. Didn't surprise me. This, though, we're due for a little bit of a pause. And so even though this date, yesterday, Thursday, Friday, could be interpreted as being very bullish, it just may be, we need a little bit movement. We need a rest period here. And I kind of see us kind of coming back and maybe testing, doing a back test to this trend line right there. I didn't quite draw that right, but if we come down, 20 cents or so, that actually could kind of strengthen the structure of this move to a certain extent. So anyway, and then again, just like in gold, if you get out into the January 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, those areas, I think part of that is a weekend, and then even into late January, this looks like we've broken through some key resistance areas of getting out of this channel. Even if we back test, if we can get above 1813, the astrology looks strong. Let's see a confirmation above this 1813 level. And if we are above there when we get into mid-January, late January, the odds, in my estimation, are that we're going to go higher. Okay, Bitcoin. Okay, Bitcoin's another story because even though there are some people tracking the movement of gold and Bitcoin, and it appears that gold seems to lead Bitcoin to a certain extent, and if that is the case, Bitcoin is trailing the precious metals quite a bit. So we should be getting a bounce. The downside of that is that we should have had a bounce this past week, and we maybe just delayed, just like we saw in the gold chart. But these two dates, are strong dates. We should be getting something happening here. We'll have to see if there's some carryover here. This is what I'm talking about right here. We'll see if we get some carryover, at least a continuation of this bounce that we got back on December 19th, which, was a fairly strong date. But we'll have to see, because we have this big gap here, and that's the point in bringing this up, is that we have a big gap of not much happening in Bitcoin until we get to essentially the end of January, early February. We do have something that's fairly strong on January 16th, and I've drawn that in. Something could happen, but it's these two dates where we should have gotten a bigger reaction, basically, and we'll see if that could still stand up over the next few days. So we just need to watch this closely. Is my point. Okay, now this is where even though when you look long term, sometimes there's not a very concise correlation between the dollar and gold and so forth. But given how much money the Fed is putting into the system, this shouldn't surprise anybody that we've got the dollar. Okay, this is a proxy. This is UUP ETF, proxy for the dollar, essentially. And it's tanking. And I mean, you could just call that a tank. It broke through a major, it didn't even stop, for this neckline that was formed, and just blew through it. I mean, conceivably, it could kind of try to back up and fill this gap and back test here. But someone's bailing the U.S. dollar. And so to have that also reflected in, in the gold market, stands to reason. And that actually eventually should sink into people's heads that it's bullish for Bitcoin as well. Okay, Nancy Pelosi's chart. Now, I have to tell you that I'm just basically an independent. I'm not one of these people who thinks that Trump is the savior, and I think that's ridiculous. And I think it's ridiculous that people that claim that he's the next Hitler. Those are just so far extremes. I can't wrap my head around them. But also, we have we have problematic personalities on both sides of the aisle. And right now, Nancy Pelosi is holding up the impeachment process by not sending it to the Senate, which, from my estimation, is just completely political, just to drag it out. So I was curious to see what her chart looked like. And, she was born in 1940. I'm not absolutely positive about her date of birth. But, it is like everyone, her astrology really reflects, who she is in my estimation. So this isn't going to be the most complimentary, commentary on Nancy Pelosi. But you can see a lot of how she expresses herself. She has on her ascendant, she has Sagittarius. If indeed she was born around midnight, a little after midnight. She has a Sag ascendant, which can be, really generous and optimistic, but also very arrogant and conceited. And she has Aries sun, okay? Sun in Aries. Aries, Sagittarius, Scorpio moon. So this person is very emotionally, very intense, likes to have things, likes to control things, have it done her way. This is an Aries, Sagittarius energy. Likes to be very, independent, very strong-willed here. And in addition, she has here I'm looking, I could try to draw this, see if I can draw this in. I'm looking at this business right around here. Okay, she has Venus conjunct Mars in Taurus, and the Venus is conjunct Uranus. Okay, very close. So this even compounds this whole idea of someone who wants to get it, have it her way, done her way, very strong-willed, very stubborn, and the Venus Mars, even though I have very close friends with close Venus Mars, and people can live with it, it is someone who has a short fuse, and in their youth would have benefited from taking anger management classes of some sort. So that's kind of true across the board. So anyway, you're finding someone who likes to, is very competitive, wants to win, very sensitive about her self-image, gets emotionally riled easily. In addition, she has the asteroid Lilith accented because it rose. This Lilith is right there. It rose just above, before the sun on the day that she was born, which, whatever planet it is, that's an emphasized planet. And Lilith deals with sort of a warrior archetype, particularly a feminine one. So, there you have it. It's kind of spelled out in her chart about, what what you see is what you get when you deal with Nancy Pelosi. And so, what's going on now, though? That's her natal chart. Let's look at her transits. So these are her transits right now, December 28th. Right now we have Jupiter, this outer ring, or where the planets are now. Inner ring is just what we just looked at, natal chart. So here we have transiting, actually Sun and Jupiter are at 5 Capricorn. They are squaring her Sun, okay, right now. Now what's the range of meaning? There's always a range of, meanings and to interpret here. Well, the way I look at this is that this can be a time when someone becomes more confident, has more sense of faith and trust in themselves and what they're doing. But the one downside with Jupiter, whether you're looking at a natal placement or a transit, is that Jupiter can bite off more than they can chew. They can overestimate their capabilities. They can become overconfident. They can overplay their hand. And Pelosi is sort of a gambler. She likes to take risks. And in this instance, I think she may, with the whole political scene that I've referenced earlier, she may be overplaying her hand. And this would be, to me, a classic astrological reflection of that, okay? And so what's happening down the road? Because if you listen to my last video, I talked about how I really thought something sizable was going to happen not only in the markets, but nationally in the U.S. in January, particularly around mid-month. Well, let's just look ahead here with Nancy Pelosi and move the transits a little bit farther. In this case, I'm kind of using a window between the 23rd and the 29th of January. And, things have moved on in this outer ring a little bit, but I'm isolating this week because she has a lot of things happening that could be triggered because it's during that week Mars has transited over her ascendant. So she's going to get a big blast of risk-taking, anger, she's jumping before she looks, or whatever that expression is. She's going to be very impulsive, and she just may say something, she just may do something that she will regret later, okay? And I see that with the Mars over a several-day period, and then also down here, if I get my drawing tool out here, you see that there's a number of things happening right here. And actually, in the last chart of her transits, and it's continuing here, she has Neptune, which is this symbol, transiting her Mercury. So not only is she, exceedingly maybe being overconfident and overplaying her hand and so forth, but she's having difficulty seeing reality clearly, because that's what Neptune does to everyone when it is strongly aspecting Mercury, which is how her mind works. Here's Mercury, here's Neptune. She's got a conjunction that's been going on for a year, and she is being it's just a matter of maybe being too dogmatic, and just not being practical, being exceptionally too idealistic are some of the things for anyone. But also just thinking clearly is not easy during these transits. Well, during this week, while Mars is transiting, she's got she's got Venus right there as well, Moon as well, and the Moon at the end of this period is going to be aspecting her Sun. So, so that Aries impulsiveness is going to be energized extraordinarily during this period, and so she, I could just see her saying something, doing something that in retrospect she may regret later. So we'll see what happens on that score. So finally, I'm just going to touch upon these two things because I think these were two interesting articles. This article was posted on a website called goldseek.com, goldseek, SEEK.com, and it was a long article written by the CPA about, just give you sort of a brief synopsis about his speculation, he admits it was, that when William Dudley wrote a op-ed piece for, was it the Washington Post? I forgot where it was. But he wrote an editorial during the week of the September 16th, indicating that possibly that Donald Trump was a threat to the Federal Reserve and the nation, and urged Fed officials to make decisions that would take into account the need to keep Trump from being reelected. And boy, I really think, this guy's stepping way beyond his bounds. And, he was the former New York Fed. Anyway, this article just gets into the idea of possibly what happened when we had this, repo emergency, interest rates ballooned back in October, I think, and how possibly that was intentionally done, and that something like that could happen again if you take into consideration these things that William Dudley was saying, and if possibly those, this line of thinking was shared by other Fed officials. So anyway, it's worth reading. I mean, he's just throwing it out there. This long article is sort of a lead-in to a book that he's writing, and so forth and so on, and so he's kind of advertising his book, but it's well written and it's an interesting article. Okay, this article came out on Zero Hedge. It's written by William Engdahl. Okay, William Engdahl. I've read a few of his books. He's a great researcher, historian, particularly into the financial markets and the corruption in the world. I highly recommend reading his books. But he goes into what appears to have happened, actions by George Soros a number of years ago to control and to manipulate the political scene in Ukraine to his own financial advantage. And this all came out from hacked letters that have just been disclosed. So this, again, brand new article today, December 28th, in Zero Hedge. But in particular, it caught my attention because Engdahl wrote it, and I really respect him. And I do recommend any of his books. Okay, so that's it for this time. Thank you. Again, my name is Stephen. I have a background in psychology, art, been studying astrology for over 40 years and applying it to financial markets for 25. I do accept Bitcoins, and please subscribe, like this video, and all that. If you, I sometimes do consulting, kind of on a very selective basis, but if you would like to get in touch with me, you can email me at astroindicator@gmail.com. So anyway, that's it for now. I do these sort of irregularly, maybe usually about every 2 weeks. So if you would like to get notified about my next one, consider subscribing. Thanks. Bye for now.